Hello, everyone. It's 7 o'clock and we will get started. Oh, and I've lost my notes. There we go. So good evening. My name is Michelle Lynn Goodfellow, and I'm the Communications and Engagement Coordinator for the PKD Foundation of Canada. Welcome to our webinar tonight on the topic of nutrition and polycystic kidney disease. Before we hear from our presenter, Emily, who is right beside me here, I just want to bring to your attention this webinar is being recorded and we'll have it available on our YouTube channel in about a week. If you have any questions, any comments or concerns, feel free to put them in the comment box or into the question and answer box. And after the presentation, we'll have some time for a live Q&A. So I encourage you to stick around for the entire event if you can. I also want to quickly let you know that we have 2 other educational webinars scheduled for the next few weeks, including another nutrition webinar in French and a webinar on mental health and chronic illness. You can find the registration links in the chat right now. And in the chat, you'll also see a link to sign up for our monthly newsletters if you don't already get them. As part of the presentation tonight, Emily will be doing a recipe demonstration, a cooking demonstration. And if you're interested to see the recipe and follow along, there's also a link in the comments for the recipe. Now, there are a couple of links there. One is a tiny link and one is a longer link. If the first one, the tiny URL, doesn't work, feel free to use the long one. And finally, we will be talking about something new that's coming out is our PKD cookbook called Love Your Kidneys. And there's also a link right now in the comments to keep posted. We're not allowed to, it's not released yet, but it will be released very soon. So let's move on. What better way to celebrate Nutrition Month this month in March and to recognize the impact that nutrition can have on PKD than with a cooking demonstration and live webinar. Our presenter, Emily Campbell, will be sharing a recipe from the new PKD-focused Love Your Kidneys cookbook. And the recipe is chicken multigrain nuggets and a Waldorf salad. Emily is a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator with a Master of Science in Foods and Nutrition. She's the owner of Kidney Nutrition, where she supports those living with kidney disease all over Canada through group and one-on-one nutrition support. Emily has worked with individuals with chronic kidney disease, polycystic kidney disease, kidney stones, and after kidney transplant. In addition to her professional work, Emily is a 2-time cookbook author, actually 3-time cookbook author now. She's probably going to tell you she's coming up with a new cookbook for those living with chronic kidney disease, and she's the co-author of our new Love Your Kidneys cookbook with the PKD Foundation of Canada. She's passionate about helping others digest the complex world of renal nutrition and supporting others in achieving their health and nutrition goals. And so, Emily, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight and sharing this snowy spring day that we're having. But we are going to be putting together a nice, comforting, and really, really delicious recipe. So what you can expect over the next 60 minutes or so is we're going to put together one of the new recipes in the Love Your Kidneys cookbook. So stay tuned. We will be coming out with this shortly. But in the meantime, you can follow along. You have a copy of the recipe as well. If you are interested in making this homemade chicken nugget dish at home. I think this is going to be, a great dinner recipe, a go-to in my house. It just really comes together in a snap, and it's great comfort food that we often feel like we can't have because sometimes there's a lot of sodium in chicken fingers, and some of the dips that we're going to be making together as well. We often worry about salt into, and when we have PKD, we want to be following a lower salt diet, which is one of those things we're going to be talking about tonight. because a healthy diet can have a huge impact on polycystic kidney disease. And it's never too early to start learning about what you can do to slow the growth of those cysts and also to preserve your kidney function. And I'm so excited for this Love Your Kidneys cookbook to come out that Roxanne and I have put together for you. It has lots of our top tips and tricks for helping to manage nutrition with PKD. But some of the things that it really focuses on are our fluids, our sodium, our protein, and our carbohydrates and sugar. And those are all things that we're going to talk about this evening as well. Because when we are able to manage those 4 key things, it helps to dilute the urine so that our hormones that cause cysts to grow can be suppressed. It also helps to make it easier for our kidneys to work. And finally, it also helps to manage our blood pressure and our cholesterol and our blood sugar. So nutrition is this great thing, and it's wonderful that we have an entire month to talk about it. But 1 month is maybe not enough. We should be thinking about it all the time. The right PKD diet, though, it's going to work to meet your nutrition needs. It's going to prevent those cysts from growing. It's going to reduce the workload of your kidneys, and it's going to help you manage any other health conditions that you have. And whenever we are, and I think maybe tonight's cooking demonstration will tell you that, is we really want to focus on our plate. And, we want to focus on meals that are going to be balanced, sustainable for us. When we start to pull out different food groups from our diet and from our nutrition, they become restrictive, and that doesn't support sustainability with nutrition. So some of the things we'll be talking about tonight revolve around how we can still have these balanced meals and help with our kidney function. So let's start with our chicken multigrain nugget and Waldorf salad. So for those of you who are here, let me know in the comments if you are a chicken nugget fan. For me, it's such a comfort, brings back so many memories, and I think that's part of nutrition. And when we think about foods, we can't just think about them as calories and protein and carbohydrates and fat. There's so much more. There's that emotional connection to them. So this recipe, I think, is perfect on this really, really snowy day here. So some of the ingredients that we need in our recipe today is a multigrain cereal. So for me today, I am going to be using the 7 Reasons multigrain cereal. You could use any flakes that are a whole grain or cereal. So the recipe calls for a multigrain because these often will have a variety of different sources of grains in them instead of being more of a whole grain. We're going to talk about that in just a second because whole grains have a lot of fiber in them. So this is going to be our first ingredient. We're also looking at some flax seeds this evening. So we have some ground flax. We're going to have some Parmesan cheese. We have some great herbs and spices and chickens, and we have some tomato sauce, and we're going to put together a Waldorf salad, which this rendition of it is absolutely delicious with a bit of coleslaw in it too. So as we get started with our cooking, though, make sure you have washed your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds because we want to make sure that as we are preparing foods, that we are also staying safe. And if you go to the washroom, you touch your pets, anything like that while you're cooking, make sure you do that wash again. So food safety is really important, right? We want to prevent ourselves from getting foodborne illness, and it really does start at the grocery store when we're buying our food, but really important when we're cooking as well. So after you've washed your hands, we're going to get started with making sure the oven is preheated to 750 degrees Fahrenheit. Have your baking sheet ready with parchment paper, and then we're going to get started with our chicken. So as I mentioned, we are going to start with the multigrain cereal. So 2 cups of this are going to go into a freezer bag, and what we are going to do is just actually crush it. So get your rolling pin out. We're going to use our muscles, and we're going to crush them down a bit. So when we use our measuring cups, we want to make sure we're using the dry measuring cup. That way it gets a nice even layer on the top. So stick your clean measuring cups into your box. A little bit of noise while we do this. And then we're going to put our 2 cups into the freezer bag. I already got started because I didn't think anyone wanted to hear me making too much noise. You'd rather hear my voice. So when you get your rolling pin, make sure you crunch it down into a very fine texture. So we picked the multigrain cereal because this one has quite a lot of fiber in it. And fiber is important for keeping us nice and full. So men between the ages of 19 and 50 need 38 grams of fiber per day. And over the age of 50, they need 30 grams per day. Women, we need a little bit less. We need between 25 grams between 19 and 50 years old and 21 grams if we're over 50. Now, fiber helps keep us full, helps keep our blood sugars regular. It helps to keep our cholesterol in a good range, and it also helps keep our bowels moving. When I buy a cereal, I always look to make sure that there's at least 4 grams of fiber in it. So we want to take a look at the nutrition facts table. We're going to look at the calories, at the serving size at the top. So for 1 cup, and then on the side here, we're going to look for fiber, and we want to make sure there's at least 4 grams of fiber in that cereal. We can also look in the ingredient list here for that word whole. So when it says whole grain, that means that there's going to be more fiber, and all of the different aspects of the wheat is there. So the bran, the germ, and the endosperm are all going to be in that cereal, and that's when we get all of the good iron, we get all the B vitamins. So we want to look for whole grains whenever possible. Also, these foods are much lower in the glycemic index. So if we have high blood sugars, have diabetes, foods that are low in glycemic index don't cause our blood sugars to spike as quickly. So sometimes after a meal where we have things like rice or pasta and we have more of those refined carbohydrates, we can feel really sluggish after, and that's because our blood sugars go like this. So trying to choose more of these lower glycemic index foods can be really helpful at managing that. In this recipe, we are also going to use the flax. So this is ground flax, and ground flax is actually a really great source of omega-3. And according to the dietary reference intake, we actually want to be consuming the omega-3 source from the ground flax seeds. Per day, men need about 1.6 grams and women need about 1.1 grams. And 1 tablespoon of flaxseed a day is enough to get all of that omega-3. So in this recipe, it calls for a 1/4 cup of ground flaxseed, which is going to go half and half, so 1/8 of a cup for each. So we're getting more than enough omega-3, and that is okay for our health as well. Now, we are using ground flax seeds, which are different than whole flax seeds. So when we have whole flax seeds, they actually have all of the fiber and all of the lignans. And while we still get some of the omega-3, because we have to chew and grind them and break them down, it's a little bit more difficult for our body to get access to that omega-3. Whereas the ground ones, we still get the fiber, we still get the omega-3, but it's a little bit easier for us. If you're buying ground flax seeds, it's best to keep them in the fridge or the freezer, and you can store them for up to 3 months. So I love going to like the bulk food store to pick them up. Or if you do pick up the whole ones, you can always grind them yourself in like a coffee grinder, or if you have a mortar and pestle, you could do that as well. The color of flax seeds, you can see here that I have a golden one. Golden or brown, it absolutely doesn't matter. Flaxseed is great. You can add it to your yogurt. You can add it to your casseroles. You can add it to your bread, your cookies. They're a really nice way of adding in some omega-3. So for this recipe, we're going to mix our flaxseed in with our multigrain cereal here. And then we are also going to put in our Parmesan cheese. So 2 tablespoons of ground Parmesan cheese. And who here, if you're watching live, thinks that because they have PKD, they can't have cheese, like Parmesan cheese? Often I hear that we get concerned about too much salt with cheese. And yes, it can have some salt in it. So that's why reading the food label is really important for that. So I love looking at the nutrition facts tables, try to find the lowest salt one. Things that are 5% or less are really great options. And then also you can choose low fat options. So just like our milk has 0, 1, 2, 3% milk, also our cheese has that percentage. And a low fat cheese is considered 20% or less. This recipe only calls for 2 tablespoons of cheese, so it's a good controlled amount. So put that in our bag as well. So we're going to coat our chicken in this in just a second. But in the meantime, we need to get our eggs ready. So eggs are a great source of protein in our diet. And one big concern with them is often, cholesterol. And when we have PKD, we also want to take care of our heart. So I'm just mixing up these eggs into a nice homogeneous mixture here in my bowl. So even if we have high cholesterol, the current recommendation is that you can still have 7 yolks per week. So if you are an egg person in the morning, you could still have 1 egg per week, or you could do 1 egg and an egg white if that's not enough for you. But we're going to talk about how much protein we should be having in just a second. The other thing you could do is, if you don't like eggs, is you could actually make a flax egg, where you mix the ground flax with water and let it form into a gel. So that's another really nice option. It's a great plant-based option as well too. All right, so these are good. Before we do this, we got to put our seasonings in. So in our chicken mixer, we are going to be putting in 1 tablespoon of chili powder. So I love chili powder. Again, I like to get my herbs from places like the Bulk Barn, or you can buy them at the grocery store. They are really great because you can keep any herbs, dried herbs or spices, for about 6 months in the cupboard. Just put them in an airtight container like these. Or if you feel inclined, you can also get them in the bags at the grocery store. So now we're also going to use an Italian blend. If you didn't have Italian blend at home, it's just a mixture of oregano, rosemary, thyme. So you could always use those individual ones. And this one just calls for a teaspoon. And then we're also going to put some black pepper in here. That was my salt first. So in order to get our chicken ready, what we are going to do is cut it up. So I've pre-cut my chicken into nice little cubes. We're using 400 grams of chicken breast. So chicken breast is a great lean source of protein when we have PKD. So there is about 7 grams of protein per 1 ounce, which when we have that size of our palm, which is about 3 ounces of protein, is 21 grams of protein. So, and that portion size is about 75 grams of weight. So this recipe is going to use 400 grams for 2 people. So each person is getting about 200 grams. And that is why there is about 28 grams of protein per serving in this recipe. So skinless chicken breast is what we're using. Skinless helps to reduce the saturated fat in our chicken. And then we also want to make sure when we're cooking it, we're going to cook it to 165 degrees Fahrenheit. That makes sure that chicken is fully cooked. When we eat raw chicken, it can make us very sick. We can get foodborne illness. And again, we want to make sure we're staying healthy. You can also freeze chicken in Ziploc bags, in airtight containers, in vacuum sealed bags, as well in the freezer for 4 months if you are buying extra. So for this recipe, we got to put our chicken in the egg mixture. So what we're doing is we are making a little coating here, and then we are going to stick the breading on the chicken. Oh, get it all nice and coated in the egg. That way we have lots of our flaxseed and crunchiness on it. And for me, that is my favorite part about having chicken. So because we're using raw meat, I'm gonna try to not touch it, but if we do, we're gonna make sure that we wash our hands with warm soap and water. You could also do this with tofu, would be another really great alternative instead of the chicken if you wanted to change. Tempeh would also work. I've never tried making something like this with fish, but I think you could also do it with fish. Oh, now pop and see if we have any questions in here right now. Okay, you guys are quiet group tonight. Feel free to ask questions. Oh, we are just going to coat all of the chicken nuggets with the great coating here. And then we're going to put them in the oven for 25 minutes, I believe. We're going to put them on parchment paper so that they don't stick to the cookie sheet. So I'm just going to put these on my cookie sheet. We'll do the rest and then we'll keep going. So have the oven at 375 already. And then that way we can just pop them in. I'm using the bake function on my oven. So if you have different settings like bake or roast, definitely try to put it on the bake one for this. We want these to be nice and crispy. All right. So that is my first group of chicken. We'll do the second one. You could probably pour the egg into the bowl as well if that would be easier for you. We just don't want to pour the egg into the breadcrumb mix. I think you could probably make this breading with other like whole grain crackers if you had them, like something like a Triscuit. You could change the flavor of them too, which might give you a bit of variety in this dish. And then I know that this is going to be a delicious dinner for me tonight and probably some leftovers for tomorrow's lunch. And this is a nice thing about when we're cooking some of these meals is not only do they, you know, come together really easily, but also they have so much flavor and so much good nutrition in them. So mix these up. So the nice part about using these Ziploc bags is that less cleanup for sure. So when you think about protein, I want to talk a little bit about protein. So protein is important for us. They're basically the building block of our body, right? They're made up of different amino acids, and amino acids help us to build our muscle, build our hair, build our skin, build our nails, and we get protein from a variety of different sources. So the most common are those animal-based proteins, and that is things like chicken or fish or beef or pork, eggs, dairy products. Those are all animal-based proteins. And they all typically have about 7 grams of protein per 1 ounce. Then there's plant-based proteins. And plant-based proteins, they have less protein per serving. So for example, things like chickpeas or lentils or tofu or tempeh, those are all what's considered nuts and seeds. Those are all considered plant-based proteins. And now having a mix of both plant and animal-based proteins is very beneficial when we have PKD. Plant-based proteins, they have less protein per serving. So for example, half a cup of chickpeas or lentils, they typically have about 7 grams of protein, which is the same amount as our nuts in a quarter of a cup. So I'm just going to put my chicken nuggets into the fridge, show you what they look like here. Or, they're not going in the fridge, they're going in the oven. There we go. And then I'm just going to wash my hands because I did touch them a little bit while we're still talking here. So whereas half a cup of tofu is going to have about 10 grams of protein in it. Now we need protein because it regulates these body functions, right? It helps us to build muscle. It helps to keep our lean tissue strong. It actually also helps us to fight infection. So we do need protein in our diet. And when we have too much protein in our diet, what ends up happening is it creates a waste product. And when waste products are removed by the kidneys, we can see them in the urine as things like creatinine and urea. And so when we are thinking about PKD, we want to protect our kidneys. So the proteins break down into these amino acids. There's 20 of them in total. 9 of them are essential, meaning we must get them from food. Animal proteins have all of the protein that we need. all of those amino acids. Whereas plant-based proteins, some have all of them, like things like quinoa, for example, has all of those 9 essential amino acids. Whereas something like nuts and seeds, they don't have all of them. So we need to actually pair these, what we would call incomplete proteins, with other proteins, like, for example, having rice and beans makes a complementary protein, and that helps us to get all of the amino acids that we need. And that's why vegetarian diets are very nutritious for us, because we can still get all of the nutrients that we need. Now, the right amount of protein, though, it depends on a few things. So with PKD, it's not a low protein diet. Like when you read things online about CKD, often they talk about a low protein diet. And actually just this week, some new recommendations came out, and it's not recommended to go as low as we previously thought anymore. So I know that part is really confusing with nutrition because things are always changing. We're always getting new studies coming out. But we don't want to follow too low of a protein diet, because then we lose muscle mass, then we can get sick. We tend to lose weight, and malnutrition can happen. So the right amount of protein, it depends on a few things. It depends on your kidney function, depends on your activity levels, depends on your other health conditions. And that's why working with a dietitian can really help you customize that. So with PKD, it's never been a low protein diet. We want to make sure we're getting the amount that we need for our activities. So a dietitian can help you calculate how much you should be having. But some concepts we can think about that we can start making changes with right now are, aiming to just have animal protein at one meal. So maybe that's dinner, right? Tonight we're making a chicken dish. And then when we do have it, try to keep it to that size of our palm. Because our kidneys are filtering units, they can really only filter about that size of protein per meal. So we want to space the protein out throughout the day, but trying to choose more of those plant-based proteins at other times of the day. So like in the morning, maybe you have things like scrambled tofu as opposed to scrambled eggs, or you have some nuts or seeds in your oatmeal. At lunch, maybe you do some chickpeas or lentils on a salad, or you do mashed chickpea sandwiches, or you do grilled tofu or tempeh in a wrap. So lots of different options there. So trying to pick more of those plant-based proteins at other meals and limiting the animal protein to that size of your palm to just one meal. And also avoiding things like protein powders. They cause the kidneys to work really, really hard, and they make us spill out extra protein. So from a protein perspective, how much you need is going to depend on a lot of things. And we can actually adjust different recipes once we know how much protein we should be having. So for example, a good rule of protein for PKD is this palm size, which is 21 grams of protein, or about the size of a deck of cards. Remember, I said that this recipe has 28 grams of protein in it. And that's because we're getting lots of protein from many, many different sources. And that's about 4 ounces. So if you're, depending on your height and your weight, you maybe need more than 3 ounces. Also, depending on your palm size, it might be bigger than me. So, 21 to 28 grams per protein per meal is a pretty good marker. When we read recipes, we can always see how many grams of protein are in them. So we can see if this is a good fit for us. Sometimes you might want to scale a recipe down. So if it asks for, 600 grams of protein in it, maybe you reduce it to 400 and you use your 3 servings out of it as opposed to 2 servings. You can also reduce the meat by 50% and add in some plant-based proteins. And that's also going to help to reduce the protein in your meals if you need it. That, I think, is a lot for protein. Definitely, I think to summarize it, trying to keep our animal protein to about the size of our palm, whether that be 3 or 4 ounces, so 21 to 28 grams of protein, and then trying to keep that animal protein to just once a meal or once a day can be really helpful. We need to make our sauce though, and I think the big concern with our sauce is sodium. So for me, usually when I have a chicken fingers or chicken nuggets like we're making today, we often will use things like barbecue sauce. And so today we're going to make a rendition with a dipping sauce, and this is going to be delicious. So in our bowl, we want to start with half a cup of no salt tomato sauce. You might be wondering, is that out there? It is, and that's where reading our food labels can be really, really helpful. So of course, sometimes we see those nutrient content claims that say no added salt. If you're having difficulty, you could always get diced tomatoes and put them in a blender and puree them. There's also other, strained tomatoes that also are quite low in sodium. So for example, this product in a quarter cup, it has 80 milligrams of salt in it. So very, very low. Whereas, a tomato sauce itself, depending on which brand you're having, a quarter cup here has 200 milligrams of salt. So remembering that it's not a no salt diet, it's very much a low sodium diet. And when we have too much salt in our diet, it increases our blood pressure, and it also increases that vasopressin hormone. And when we have too much vasopressin, it increases the cyst growth. So we want to keep that low. And how we do that is by reducing the salt intake and by increasing our fluids. So when we think about sodium intake, it's about 2,000 to 2,300 milligrams of salt per day. Staying closer to that 2,000 milligrams is very beneficial and based on current guidelines. And that's actually less than 1 teaspoon of salt. So 1 teaspoon of salt, that's a tablespoon. So 1 teaspoon of salt, this much, it actually has 2,300 milligrams of salt in it. And that's salt from everything, right? That's salt naturally in the food. That's salt that we add at the table. That's salt that we add when we're cooking. And so we want to really try to keep it to as little salt as possible. We need some salt in our body to keep it running properly, but too much of a good thing is also not good. So reading the food labels, really, really helpful. Also, looking for those nutrient content claims that say like no added salt or low sodium. These ones are always going to have less than 5% daily value for sodium, which is why things like these strained tomatoes are a really great option too. When you're cooking, you can actually reduce the salt in any recipe by 25%. So if a recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of salt, you can reduce it to 3/4 of a teaspoon and you won't notice any difference in taste. It takes about 14 days for our taste buds to get used to reducing salt. So we do need to stick with it. And when we read our recipes online, we can choose ones that are close to that 500 milligrams per recipe, which allows us, if we have breakfast, lunch, and dinner and a couple of snacks, then that keeps us close to that 2,000 milligrams per day. It's always better to adjust the salt after you've been cooking. So if you can limit how much you are using when you are cooking, then it gives you a bit more flexibility to add some when you are at the table. So it's not a no salt diet. Some of my clients, some of my patients, they do need to add a little bit of sprinkle, and we calculate that into that daily amount. But let's make this low sodium dipping sauce. So here we have the no added salt tomato sauce, which is 1/2 cup. And then into it, I'm going to be adding in some things that we often think we can't have with CKD and PKD because they do have some salt in them, like Worcestershire sauce. So in this recipe, we are going to use 1 teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce, which has 55 milligrams of salt in it. It's going to give a little bit of an umami taste, which is one of the other tastes that we look for when we're cooking. Perks up our taste buds, and it doesn't matter if it's like No Name or any other brand. We are also going to put in a tablespoon of brown sugar. I'm using a dark brown sugar. You can choose whatever one you want. And then we are also using a smoked paprika to give that kind of barbecue flavor taste. So we need 1/2 a tablespoon of smoked paprika. So again, these dried herbs are great because they don't have any extra salt in them. There's a big difference. Oops, getting a lot of barbecue sauce today. There's a big difference between things like garlic powder and garlic salt. So we're using garlic powder and onion powder in our recipe. So we want 1/2 a teaspoon of each of those. So I'm a big fan of garlic. It is a great prebiotic food, so good for our gut, whether it be in the dried form or, chopped. Similarly, onions and leeks and Jerusalem artichokes are also really great prebiotics, and cabbage. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. So now we have all of our stuff in our dipping sauce ready to go. I'm going to mix this together and let it all meld while we wait for about 15 more minutes for our chicken nuggets to finish up. but I wish we had smell-o-vision tonight because they actually smell very, very delicious. And in the meantime, we will have enough time to make our Waldorf salad. All right. So here is our homemade barbecue sauce for our dipping sauce, which is going to be very, very delicious on these chicken nuggets. So I'm just going to put this aside for now. So in the meantime, we need to finish preparing our salad that we're going to serve it with. So when we think about PKD, we really want to try to incorporate a lot of fiber into our diet. And fiber, as I mentioned, not only does it keep us full, it also, most of the fiber sources come from vegetables and fruit. And plant-based proteins and whole grains are some of the other really great sources of fiber in our diet. Fiber helps to manage our blood sugars, helps to manage our bowel regularity, helps to manage our cholesterol. It also, from a kidney perspective, it helps to reduce inflammation, and it also helps to manage the acid-base balance of our body. And that helps to preserve our kidney function. So ideally, we want to be having majority, like 50% of our meal in vegetables at lunch and dinner, and hopefully breakfast as well, but sometimes breakfast is fruit. And the most common types of fiber in our diet, as I mentioned, come from a variety of sources. So when we think about PKD, we've talked a bit about these whole grains tonight. So whole grains are a type of carbohydrate. They come in things like barley or bulgur or oatmeal, whole grain bread, brown rice, quinoa. All of these have a lot more fiber in them compared to things like white bread, white rice, more of those refined carbohydrates. The other place we get it is from our vegetables. So we want to always aim for a rainbow of colors for our vegetables for our meals. And as you can see tonight, we're going to have a bit of green from our coleslaw. We'll have some red seedless grapes. We also have some apples. So we're getting a red here. We have some celery that's going to go in it as well. So we are getting a lot of reds and greens. And then we want to try out our other meals to be getting things like whites and blues and orange and purple. And then we get a rainbow of colors, and that gives us all of the different vitamins that we're looking for. Each color of vegetable has different vitamins and minerals, and that's why we want to get a variety of them in. So ideally, half of our plate at every single meal should be in vegetables or fruit. This recipe, we are focusing on the cabbage. So it starts with 2 cups of grated cabbage. I use the shredding function on my food processor earlier to grate this as a time saver. You can also use a box grater. So make sure you're washing your fruits and vegetables just with water. And I should actually mention we don't need to wash our chicken. As you know, I just washed my hands before I started prepping and then washed them after I touched the chicken. We don't need to wash our meat. When we do that, the bacteria actually goes everywhere in our kitchen, and that's not good. Vegetables and fruit, though, we want to make sure we're washing them. So for this, if we're just gonna grate some more, we want 2 cups of grated cabbage. You could do a mixture of red and green if you, purple and green if you wanted to. Another thing I'll say, I'm not gonna put this in there because I just realized that there's egg on here as well. What I was going to actually say is another thing to think about when you're cooking is actually having 2 different cutting boards. So you always want one for the vegetables and then one for the meats as well. We don't want to worry about cross-contamination with the raw vegetables and cooked and raw meats. So that is important. In addition to our 2 cups of cabbage, so cabbage is actually from the cruciferous vegetable category. It's really high in fiber, really high in vitamin C, vitamin K, folate. It's got a prebiotic, as I mentioned. So meaning that the fiber in cabbage fuels the good bacteria in our gut and in our large intestines. And when we feed our gut with good things, not only is it good for our body, good for our mental health, it also helps to manage our kidney function. So yogurt, like a probiotic yogurt, kefir, these are also other sources of probiotics that you might have in your diet, but prebiotics like cabbage and leeks and asparagus and many, many more that we're going to be sharing next month with you help to feed the good bacteria. So those are perfect. So in this recipe, We are also putting in some cut up grapes. So in the recipe, you will notice that it's 1 cup of grapes half. So what you actually need to do is you need to measure your 1 cup of grapes and then cut them up. If it was 1 cup of halved grapes, then it would be 1 cup of halved grapes in the recipe. So because the halved is afterwards, that's how we know that it is going to cut them after we've measured them. We're also doing 1 apple. So diced with the skin on, again, making sure we're washing our vegetables and fruit. And then 1 celery stalk. So I love celery. It is a great crunchy vegetable for me. And in the Waldorf salad, it is awesome. So we'll make sure we wash the celery. I always just cut it in the middle there, and then we're gonna wanna make really small cuts. And if you've ever been on a cooking demonstration, I'm gonna make the same joke that I always do. I really need to take a knife skills course. Even though I do so much cooking, it is often a big joke in my home of how terrifying it is with a knife. So just gonna go very slowly, cut this into nice small pieces. We're slicing it up. You know, I love cooking, I love writing cookbooks, I love talking about nutrition, and sometimes we don't always have time to take those extra courses, but there are lots of options out there. So this is just going to add a little bit of extra crunch to our salad here. I'm not seeing any questions come in yet, guys, so feel free to let me know which ones you have. As we make our salad here, one of the things that is included in it is actually some yogurt and also some mayonnaise to make our dressing. So I want to talk a little bit about added sugars. So yes, we have a tablespoon of brown sugar in our recipe in the sauce. So sugars, it gives us energy because it has calories in it. Natural sugars from things like fruits, different vegetables like potatoes, and then dairy products have other vitamins in them. They have fiber, they have protein, they have vitamins in them, and those are really good in our diet. Added sugars like brown sugar, maple syrup, those are things that we want to be aware of, those sources in our diet. So it's not that we can't have them, it's that we want to try to find the ones that have less than 5%. So just like salt, 5% or less. Also looking for claims that say like no added sugar. That's a really great one there. And then when we're preparing recipes, we can actually reduce the sugar in them, like the maple syrup or the table sugar by 1/4, and not seeing any change into in the taste of them. So those are some tips at reducing the added sugars in our diet. But it's not that we can't have them. We can still have about 6 teaspoons of sugar per day. That's sugar from kind of things like our brown sugar that we might have in this sauce. It might be if you are having any other treats or things like that in your diet as well. The other nice thing about yogurt, which I love in this, is it's a really good source of calcium. So calcium is of course important because it helps to keep our bones strong. You don't necessarily need to use dairy products. If you prefer to use non-dairy products like coconut yogurt, those sort of things, definitely fine to have. They're lower in protein. So if you would rather get your protein sources from other things, they can be good alternatives, but also you just want to make sure they're fortified with calcium. And just like our cheese, we want to look for the percentage of milk fat. So for things like yogurt, 0%, 2%, those are all low fat options. Just like your milk, 0%, 2%, 1%, those would all be considered low fat. Those are great from a cholesterol perspective. In our sauce that we're going to make, we are going to use 2 tablespoons of natural yogurt. So I'll just put it in my bowl here. I'm going to mix it all together. So I pre-cut my apples, and I'll let you know, a little trick is if you actually put a little bit of lemon juice on them, they don't go brown. So that is no problem. We have 5 minutes left on our chicken fingers, and I'm really getting excited. So the other part in our dressing is actually a 1/4 cup of mayonnaise. So you can choose an olive oil based mayonnaise, which is really great from kind of a heart health perspective. So again, making sure that things that we're eating for our kidneys are also good for our heart. So you can certainly have mayonnaise in your diet with PKD, just trying to make the healthy choices, right? So things like an olive oil based one or a low fat option are kind of great there. So those go in our bowl. And then we are also going to put a tablespoon of chive. This recipe from the Love Your Kidneys cookbook is actually going to be free for you. So you can just get it on the PKD website shortly. It will also be available on the Spice It Up website. So if you're familiar with there, this PKD specific cookbook is free. You don't have to buy it. So we're really, really looking forward to having that available for you. All right, so my sauce is nice and ready here for my Waldorf salad. So in my bowl, I have my cabbage, I have my apples, I have my celery, I have my grapes. We're gonna mix it all together. And then I actually love a Waldorf salad. I find them very, very filling. They're a nice alternative to having, a green salad. Just toss this all together. This will also last in the fridge overnight. So whenever we have leftovers, because I will definitely have some leftovers of my chicken nuggets tonight, you can make sure you put your food in the refrigerator within 2 hours after cooking it. So we want to prevent any bacteria from growing on it. And then also we want to make sure we use our leftovers up within 2 days. This salad will be great. I have my plates ready in the back there. Napkin, my fork. I don't know about you, but I'm getting very hungry. All right. So here is what our Waldorf salad looks like. You could also add in some nuts. I think walnuts is typically in a Waldorf salad as well. So if you had some unsalted walnuts, that would be a nice also addition for you. All right. So we got a couple minutes here. I'm just going to pop in and take a look at some of these questions here. Okay, so parathyroid hormone that's a very good question, Julia. Thank you for asking. Doesn't actually necessarily mean that you're not getting enough calcium. So it is a hormone that is related to our calcium and vitamin D and phosphorus in our body. And so there's a very tight regulation between all of these. And our kidneys regulate an additional hormone called FGF23. And if our kidney function is lower, this is typically when we would see the parathyroid hormone increasing, because our body just naturally has difficulty keeping this homeostasis between these hormones. I would definitely connect with the dietitian in your renal center if you do have a high PTH or parathyroid hormone. We want to make sure your bones are staying strong. So there's lots we can still do from a nutrition perspective. Also, we want to prevent calcification in our blood vessels, right? So if things like the phosphorus is high, we want to make sure your heart's staying healthy too. But we still need calcium. It's not that we need to stay away from it. All right. We have 1 minute left. I'm gonna get my plates ready so that we can enjoy our lovely meals together. Want to make sure we got everything in our recipe. I'm notorious for missing things. I think we're good. All right. Plates are ready. We have chives, which are in the onion family. I just picked mine up at the grocery store. In our yogurt sauce, you could probably use green onions if you have that at home as well. If you grow chives in the summer, they kind of go wild, which is also lovely, lovely. I just put chives in everything. I think they're a great addition to add some flavor. All right, I'll let you think of your questions. My timer is going off, so we're gonna get our chicken nuggets out. am going to use my meat thermometer to make sure that these are at 165. Oh, I just broke the kitchen rule and only used one oven mitt when I was going in there. So I like a digital thermometer to make sure that my meats are fully cooked. I find they're just a little bit more accurate. But we are good to go. You just want to put it in the thickest portion. Yeah, we're way over 200. So we are nice and cooked. Okay. So this recipe, 200 grams, 400 grams of chicken is for 2 people. So this is quite a lot. So you could probably even get a couple more portions out of it, depending on how big of an eater you are. I'll serve this up. Show you guys a plate. See, there's another question there about nuts. So we don't need to avoid nuts with PKD. They are a great plant-based protein to incorporate. Of course, we want to try to choose those unsalted ones if possible. If you have a history of kidney stones, avoiding things like that have more oxalate in them could be helpful depending on your urine values. So if you have high oxalate in your urine, things like almonds and walnuts have a bit more oxalate in them. But many, many years ago, we used to tell kidney patients that they shouldn't have nuts and seeds because they have potassium and phosphorus in them. We now know that the bioavailability of these foods is much less, meaning we don't actually absorb as much of it from the food as we used to think we did. And including them in our diet is something that's really, really helpful for us, right? They're good for our heart. They're easier for our kidneys to filter. So we do want to incorporate them in. So I would definitely connect with a renal dietitian to see if you can add foods to your diet. Often we think there's a lot of no's when we have PKD, but there actually should be a lot of yeses that we have in our diet. As long as we're keeping the osmolarity of the urine low, so we're drinking at least our 3 liters of water, we are making sure we're following a low salt diet, we're getting moderate amounts of protein, and then we're incorporating lots of fiber from those whole grains, from our vegetables and fruits, then we are giving ourselves the most nutritious foods out there. And everyone is going to have different nutrition recommendations, and that's why we look at your blood work, we look at your health history, and so working with a renal dietitian can be really helpful. So if you haven't met with one, certainly connecting with one through your nephrologist is a great spot to start. So we're all good to eat here. I'll just show you my plate. So we got lots of our Waldorf salad here. I have some of our dips and then our chicken nuggets here. These look so crispy. I'm gonna sneak a little taste while we are just checking for a couple last questions. This is so good. I hope you make this recipe. These chicken nuggets are very, very crisp. Sorry for talking with my mouth full. And the barbecue sauce is spot on. That will actually be very nice for summer barbecue time as well. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for listening and following along. It's a really special day to be talking about food and PKD. I hope you learned some new tips and tricks. And if you have any questions, I'm always available to answer them.
And feel free, we still have a few more minutes on the on this webinar. If you still have questions that you'd like to ask, pop them in the Q&A or in the chat. I see there's one more. Oh, someone's saying thank you for the information on nuts.
One thing I'll say, sorry.
Go ahead.
One thing I'll say about nuts is, you know, not everyone with PKD develops kidney stones. So while it is a common condition associated with it, that thought that we need to avoid all of these foods like spinach and raspberries and rhubarb because they have oxalates in them might not be appropriate for you.
While we're waiting for a few more questions, if anyone still has questions, I just want to thank Emily for being here tonight and offering this really tasty chicken nugget recipe from our new cookbook, the Love Your Kidneys. we're really hoping that it's going to be available soon. We'll keep you up to date on when that's going to be coming out. One thing I really enjoyed learning is that I wasn't aware of, Emily, was that people didn't have to reduce their protein as much if they have PKD as they do if you're a CKD patient.
Yeah, the world of PKD, we've learned so much in the last few years. When I first started practicing almost 10 years ago, we didn't even know that there was a difference between PKD and CKD. And now we know how beneficial nutrition is for keeping the osmolarity of the urine. And yes, I'm going to say these words. Yes, we see things online about keto and plant-based and intermittent fasting and PKD. And right now here, we are really focusing on the evidence base. And as we know, Canadian recommendations support a low osmolar diet. Maybe in the future, they'll support other things, but, following a keto diet has its own risks of nutrient deficiencies, increased amounts of saturated and trans fats in your diet, and that's not good for liver cysts. So, what might work for you might not work for someone else. And that's why we need to take a personalized approach with it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Emily, for being here with us tonight. We really appreciate the partnership that we have with you. I don't know if viewers are aware, Emily actually writes a monthly blog for our website on a variety of topics having to do with nutrition and PKD. And if you'd like to check them out, I will put the link in the comments. In fact, I can do that right now while we're waiting. I have a bunch of links to share with you. Some of them were at the beginning of the webinar as well. And so you can check out everyone. Emily also did a presentation at our 2023 PKD Summit last November, and I've put a link to that in the comments now. If you want to check out that video, it's just some basic information to know if you've got PKD or dealing with PKD. You can check out her blogs on our website. We have a link I've put at the very bottom for when our Love Your Kidneys cookbook is available. Keep checking that link and it will be there. I'll also be sending out an email to everyone who's registered tonight with these links. And when the cookbook is available, I will be, you'll be the first to know. You'll be the first to get the link. So, are there any other questions? It looks like not.
We have lots of information out there. And I will also say on the summit from last year, there is a chickpea and kale Caesar salad with a homemade Caesar salad dressing that also is a fan favorite here in my household. So if you're looking for something like that, Parmesan cheese, garlic, I love those things. So they're in there.
What are some of the recipes from the new cookbook that you really like or that you've tried?
Yeah, so the recipes focus on each topic of PKD nutrition has some recipes. So we have some on hydration. We have some lower sodium ones. There is an apple and pear cake that was one of my recipes in there that I would say is probably one of my favorites. It uses some whole grain flour, so it has a bit of a nuttier texture, nice fall dish to use up your apples and your pears, and then it's quite low in added sugars as well. So that one's probably my favorite.
Thanks.
And I actually think Roxanne's recipe is more of my favorite right now.
Well, that's fair too. Was there anything surprising to you when you were putting together the booklet?
Yeah, I think the world of nutrition is always changing, and that's where renal dietitians are helpful for patients and those living with PKD and their family members. The most surprising was how there isn't a lot of support here right now for patients. And so the PKD Foundation over the last year, we've really been growing with the nutrition information and sharing all of that. And I think that this cookbook is so timely for Nutrition Month as well as one tool in in a lot of things that we can use to help preserve our kidney function and manage PKD.
See, we're almost near the end of our time. I don't see any other questions. So I'll say thank you to Emily one more time. I'll let people know, check out any of the links that I've put into the comments. I'll also include them in an email coming out to you tomorrow. And I'm wishing everyone who's watching this that you have fun exploring some of the kidney-friendly ways to have a fantastic and yummy, delicious diet.
Bon appetit!
Thanks a lot.